Hey everybody, Pastor Joe Best here, and I wanted to very quickly just give you 5 ways that we ought to respond to the cross of Jesus Christ. Yesterday we had an amazing day of worship as we opened up God's Word together as a church family, and we came to the most important event, not only in the Gospel of John, but of human history itself. We looked at the death of Jesus on the cross, and we had a great response to that teaching, but one of the questions that we heard over and over from people was, what is an appropriate way for me as a Christian to respond to the cross? What are some things that the cross does in us and through us when we think about it? And so the 5 ways that I want to give you. First is to see the cross as confronting us with something. You see, Jesus wasn't a victim of his circumstances. The cross was something planned by God and promised long ago, and it ultimately was the fulfillment of God's plan and promise to us, that God would redeem and rescue sinners from their sin. But it wasn't just meant to show us the plan of redemption, it was meant to reveal something else. That through the cross, God was revealing our sin to us, that he was showing us that our sin deserves death, and that either we pay for our sin or Christ pays for it for us. And so the cross was meant to reveal sin to the world watching. But we know that being confronted with something is not enough. And so God didn't just mean for the cross to confront us with our sin, but ultimately to convict us of that same sin. And conviction is agreeing with God that sin is serious, that sin is worthy of punishment, and that as Christ died on the cross, he was ultimately dying because and for our sin. And so we're convicted over that. We understand that sin is wrong and that God has to make it right through punishment. And so we're convicted over that. But conviction is not enough. You see, at the cross, God intended for us to find comfort. That as Jesus died to pay the penalty for our sin, he did so, and he did so in full. That when we're convicted and we feel shame and guilt over our sin, that we come to the cross to find forgiveness, and we're confident that God forgives us. John, in another writing in 1 John, tells us that God is faithful and just to forgive us of all of our sin if we just confess it to him. And so we're convicted over our sin, but we find confidence that God forgives us when we confess it to him. And so that's the 3rd way. But the 4th way is this, that we would be changed. When we think about the cross and we look at the cross and we see what Christ had to do in order to secure our salvation and to offer us forgiveness, we as Christians should no longer desire to live in the very sin that Christ died to save us from. And so we should be compelled to change, to live for Christ because he died for us. And so we look at the life of Christ to find an example of what that looks like. Everything from loving our neighbor to forgiving those who have sinned against us to doing well and praying for our enemies. We live as Christ lived because this is the way that God intended us to live. And we love him because he died for us, and we want to dedicate and commit our lives to living for him. And so that's the 4th way. But the 5th way is this, that we don't only want that for ourselves, but we're compelled by the cross to go and tell others the good news that Jesus saves. That we would share the gospel, we would tell others the truth, that though our sin is worthy of death, that Christ died in our place, and that if we put our faith and trust in him, he's willing to forgive us and love us and change us of all of our sin and to make us new and to give us a new life. And so just very quickly, the 5 things that the cross is meant to for us to respond to. First, to be confronted. Second, to be convicted. 3rd, to find confidence and comfort in the cross. 4th, to be changed by it, to live for Christ because he died for us. And 5thly, to be compelled to go and share the good news with others. And so I hope that's helpful for you, and I hope that you can live out the application of the cross in your life today.